Originally released in 2014 to Steam Early Access and developed and published by Digital Confectioners, it's Depth for the PC. What you're currently seeing is, revision, that version of the game. Anyways, in Depth you play as either the divers or the sharks, with no real major context or story aside from a brief description of the divers and how they are suddenly risking their lives for some treasure at the bottom of the ocean, usually due to gambling problems or a hatred of sharks, which I find hilarious. For the divers, you're a team of 4, and your main objective is to basically follow Steve, a robot that basically opens up vaults so you can get money in order to upgrade your gear, similar to games such as Counter-Strike. You can also find treasure around the environment as well, all while obviously having to avoid the team of sharks. Keep in mind, there is a counter of how many times your team dies on each team. Once that hits 0, you basically stop respawning, and if you all die, then obviously the sharks win, or vice versa. Your goal is to survive long enough for Steve to loot all of the chests and return safely back to the boat. As for the sharks, their objective is pretty simple: kill the divers. To keep things balanced, the sharks are only in a team of 2. They can either kill the divers down to 0 or take out their robot, Steve. You'll notice Steve has a health bar. If the divers aren't careful and Steve is completely destroyed, they'll lose their ability to respawn and once killed, remain dead, and thus the sharks have won. There is also a Megalodon mode, where a team of 5 divers go against one giant Megalodon shark, and you can find treasure around the environment to upgrade your weapons, and whoever kills the shark first then becomes the shark the next time it spawns. But is the game any good? Let's start things off with the good. Possibly the strongest point to Depth is the unique concept behind it. I honestly can't think of too many games that I can compare it to except for possibly Evolve. But easily one of the strongest aspects it has going for it is the pick up and play and ease of access to the gameplay. I had no trouble at all getting sorted with the controls, or figuring out what I needed to do within the first couple of minutes of gameplay. But that's not to say there isn't any mastery to the gameplay. It definitely still has a skill curve. For example, we ran into our share of very experienced players every now and then who completely ripped us apart. Literally. Oh god. No. Dude, those sharks are fucking us up. The gameplay overall works really well. The controls are smooth and easy to figure out for both the divers and the sharks, and the weapon loadouts and different shark species you can play as are varied enough to experiment with. And overall, the game feels very balanced from what I played within my 5 or so hours I spent with Depth. It never got old being next to your friend the 1 minute and then seeing them get taken away and ripped apart by a shark the next. The environments and atmosphere and intense gameplay are absolutely spot on in this. But easily the best part of the game is playing as the shark. Picking off the divers one by one and trying to spoot them after you've destroyed their Steve robot felt satisfying as hell. The shark gameplay also requires quite a bit of skill. You can't blindly rush 4 divers expecting to come out alive. You'll have to play it smart and tactical and coordinate your attacks. For example, destroying certain walls to get a good vantage point or try and set up an ambush, or single out the divers swimming too far away from the rest of the group.
Fuck you.
Playing as the shark felt very tactical to play as, something I'm awful at personally, but nevertheless is still some of the strongest aspects to the game. But let's move on next to the bad. Starting things off with something minor, we had quite a bit of trouble early on figuring out how matchmaking worked, but we managed to figure it out. But probably the biggest issue I have with Depth is the lack of content. We played this over the free Steam weekend, and we pretty much played everything the game had to offer, and we were already kinda over it by Sunday. Sure, you can unlock different abilities and weapons and such, but overall the content is pretty lacking, especially for the full price they're asking for. Once you've played each of the maps as both the divers and sharks and the Megalodon mode a few times, you've pretty much seen most of the stuff the game has to offer. So hopefully they continue to keep updating this over the next coming months or even years if they expect to have a community around. But now let's discuss the ugly, where we discuss the graphics, technical aspects, and the soundtrack of the game. Now, graphically, Depth isn't really much to look at. The texture work is passable and the character models and the divers aren't anything special. But the environments themselves stand out pretty well. They range from deep-sea mines to sunken ships to even ancient underwater ruins, and they all have a great atmosphere and very spooky feel to them to explore. Not to mention having sharks possibly being around every corner. As I said, overall the atmosphere of the game is great, especially from the diver side of things. with very limited vision in the underwater fawning effect from your heartbeat racing as a shark gets closer to you, also giving you a heads up on how close they are. Depth nails the underwater environments and atmosphere. However, we did have a few odd glitches in our 5 or so hours with the game, such as picking a class of shark, and then somehow ending up with a completely different type of shark when the round started, to some crashing issues every now and then. Now as for the soundtrack side of things, it's nothing really special and pretty forgettable. But this is minor since thankfully you can select your own music through Steam's playlist feature. At the end of the day, if you got some friends and you're looking for a fun and unique game, then definitely consider giving Depth a try. I just wouldn't pay full price for it personally. But now, it's time for my rating. I give Depth.
Deepest blue is my hat is like a shark's fin. Deepest blue is my hat is like a shark's fin. Deepest blue is my hat is like.